We have completed 9 months of Trump's second term. So far, it is going far worse than my initial thoughts back in January. Trump is an authoritarian, fascist dipshit who threatens the peace and prosperity of our country and every human being on this planet. The words I use are not hyperbole. The actions of Trump and his administration have been catastrophic to our collective well being, and in the many examples we will discuss, have been outright unconstitutional. The evidence to support an impeachment proceeding is there, just waiting to be brought forth by a Congress with a spine. In today's chat, there are two main topics. The first half will cover clear examples of constitutional amendments and other constitutional clauses and how they are being broken. Any other president would have been impeached after just one of today's examples. As Congress continues to delay impeachment proceedings, the more crimes and human rights violations Trump and his administration will continue to commit. There is a vast amount of topics and crimes to discuss, so I have narrowed that down to 4 categories with several examples to support each claim. We will start with how Trump is deeply against the First Amendment, despite constant claims by his supporters saying the opposite. After that, we will discuss how his militarized ICE domestic terrorists have violated the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 8th Amendments of American citizens and our residents. Some people in our country, and sadly is often the same people who are in ICE, fail to understand our Constitution. Several of our amendments, including the ones listed, apply to everyone in our country, every person, regardless of documentation status. ICE needs to be abolished, and we will go over how their daily terrorism violates the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 8th constitutional amendments. After that, we are still not done with the evidence. Trump has been using the office of the presidency to enrich himself like no president has done before. These actions are in direct violation of the Emoluments Clause. For those not familiar with the term emolument, for anyone in public office, but in this particular case, the president, our own Constitution forbids the president from accepting any compensation during their time in office outside of their salary. The last piece of evidence for Trump's impeachment is what I grouped together under general constitutional abandonment. This includes how Trump has failed his oath of office to uphold the Constitution and his violations of the separation of powers. This has been done repeatedly by withholding congressional approved funds, by executive orders and the actions of DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. Additionally, we will discuss Trump's unrestrained use for military intervention, once again despite claims from his supporters of how pro-peace he is. Like most statements from Trump or about him, they are lies. When he isn't lying, it's unfortunately when he's about to do something unconstitutional or violating human rights. As we go through this, you may ask if all these events are happening. Then why hasn't Congress acted yet? Shouldn't they be having this conversation? Well, Congress should be having this conversation. And to the credit of 79 members of the House back in June of 2025, they tried. But that will be discussed more in the second half of this video. And one last quick thing before jumping in. I just want to take a quick moment to describe the purpose of the Secular Lefty Chat video series. I am not a journalist by profession. I do not have a research or production team. I am an American with enough mental capability to speak on these topics and other topics in the series confidently. These videos are the result of the work I can put into them when I have some spare time, and the primary reason I do these is to provide an educational resource on political policy and on political theory. This is so we, the American people, can organize and demand a better future for ourselves. In this video, there is the additional goal to guide us on a potential nonviolent path out of this fascist hellscape. So now, let's talk impeachment. The First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution is quite clear. For those of us who may not remember or have forgotten completely, here's the exact text. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So what that's stating is we have the right to go out and protest, We are allowed to criticize our government when we disagree with it, and the government has no authority, no right to prohibit the freedom of speech or of the press in this country. Trump's very character has always been against free speech. He is a fascist, thin-skinned little bitch, and over the years sued various people and organizations for speech he found offensive, like the crybaby snowflake he is. Starting with a more serious case, on March 8th of 2025, ICE domestic terrorists arrested Mahmoud Khalil, a student at Columbia University that had helped organize Palestinian protests the previous year. ICE stated they were acting on State Department orders to revoke his visa. His case is still being litigated in the court systems, despite it being a clear attack on Khalil's First Amendment rights. The Department of Homeland Security had stated that this was done in support of Trump's executive orders prohibiting anti-Semitism. Once again, a lie that has to be continuously pushed back by these people as they conflate being against genocide with being anti-Semitic. These protests were for human rights. They support human rights of both Palestinians and Israelis. There's nothing anti-Semitic about that. This, of course, has not been the only attack on protesters either, as Trump has ramped up immigration raids and deployed National Guard troops to cities. While not unique to Trump, protesters being brutalized by police and various law enforcement has unfortunately always been a part of U.S. history. What makes Trump's moves additionally worthy of impeachment is his deployment of National Guard to cities, which is only just the pilot stage of him declaring martial law. This is his way of increasing his authoritarianism and will continue to do so if not stopped. Another attack on both protesters and free speech is his executive order banning flag burning. This was signed back on August 25th, despite multiple court rulings over the years protecting flag burning as a form of free speech. Unfortunately, our current Supreme Court does have a bad habit of overriding precedent against our interests of human rights and progress, so who knows. In the next segment, we will mention a recent court decision that has granted ICE more authority to be more racist and more reckless in their human rights violations. Continuing with the examples of the First Amendment, there have been multiple lawsuits filed by Trump against various media companies. Two such recent examples of companies folding to Trump's lawfare intimidation are ABC News and its parent company Disney, settling for $15 million in December of 2024. Now you may say, well, that was before Trump took office. Fair enough. Back in July of this year, though, CBS News and its parent company Paramount Global settled for $16 million. What makes each of these cases so sad is they would have won in court just on the basis of First Amendment protections. However, these settlements weren't given to Trump because they thought the lawsuits had merit. They gave Trump the money to pay the mob boss a favor. This is another bribe. Yes, the first one was settled before he took office, but the point is, why are we allowing media companies to bribe the president so they can get various mergers approved through the FCC? To close out this segment, I have two clips here. The first is Trump giving some of his thoughts on free speech. This takes place on Air Force One during a Q&A with press on September 18th. First, he is asked about Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, and then talks briefly about Jimmy Kimmel.
Is she originally from Somalia? So how are they doing this? How's their government? Do they have a president? Do they have a council? Do they have anything? Do they have police? I love these people that come from a place with nothing, no anything, and then they tell us how to run our country. No, I think if she got censured, that's great. If she got impeached, that's even better. They impeached me twice for nothing, and they impeached me knowing the Republicans are on my side, so they knew it was just that they impeached me. But she should be impeached, and it should happen fast. What she says is out of line. Yeah, go ahead. Anybody?
Mr. President, who would you like to see? Mr. President, are you going to ask Brendan Carr to weigh in on other late-night hosts that you have said should be off the air?
Late-night host is on network television. There is a licensing. I'll give you an example. I read someplace that the networks were 97% against me. I got 97% negative, and yet I won in easily, won all 7 swing states, popular, won everything. And if they're 97% against, they give me only bad publicity for press. I mean, they're getting a license. I would think maybe their license should be taken away. It will be up to Brendan Carr. I think Brendan Carr is outstanding. He's a patriot. He loves our country, and he's a tough guy. So we'll have to see.
In a minute 30, Trump meanders his way through several things, and I know the audio isn't the greatest, so let's break down what was said. Putting Trump's clear racism of Ilhan Omar and Somalia aside, he is clearly stating support for censuring Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, silencing her speech all because he doesn't like what she says. Also notice how he doesn't give an example of what she says that would be a reason for why she should be censured. Trump is one of those people that he will attack anyone and everyone every day. But the minute someone calls him out on his bullshit, he becomes a thin-skinned fascist bitch demanding the offensive speech he doesn't like be silenced. When asked about late-night hosts, after complaining how they and the rest of the media are all against him, he mentioned that pulling their broadcasting license should be considered by the head of the FCC, Brendan Carr. As a reminder, here is what Carr had to say on the topic, which happened to be a day prior, on the 17th of September, while speaking on a right-wing podcast.
And what appears to be an action by Jimmy Kimmel to play into that narrative that this was somehow a MAGA or Republican motivated person. If that's what happened here with his conduct, that is really, really sick. And I've been very clear from the moment that I have become chairman of the FCC, I want to reinvigorate the public interest. And what people don't understand is that the broadcasters, and you've gotten this right, are entirely different than people that use other forms of communication. They have a license granted by us at the FCC, and that comes with it an obligation to operate in the public interest. And we can get into some ways that we've been trying to reinvigorate the public interest and some changes that we've seen. But frankly, when you see stuff like this, I mean, look, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. These companies can find ways to change conduct and take action, frankly, on Kimmel, or there's going to be additional work for the FCC ahead.
So there we have, in Brendan Carr's own words, using the FCC in a way against the First Amendment, turning the rule of law into a mafia-style transaction. We could go on about the back and forth with Kimmel having his show suspended and then brought back after protests by viewers, but I hope the point has been made clear now. This administration is deeply against the First Amendment, and there is no doubt other evidence could be added. But let's move on to another set of amendments Trump and his Department of Homeland Security, DHS, and Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, have been doing these last several months. During Trump's 2024 campaign, it was no secret he was planning to increase deportations in this country. His campaign often made racist remarks about illegals coming into this country, bringing drugs, raping, killing, and eating Americans, or how they eat the cats and the dogs. Many absurd statements. But in between the absurdity were the cruel truths being talked about openly. Trump planned on giving more support to ICE to conduct raids, and had at many times during his first term expressed interest in using the National Guard or other federal troops to end protests and enforce his domestic agenda. The immigration policies carried out by ICE over these last 9 months have been an unconstitutional fascist nightmare. Any honest person discussing the actions taken by ICE knows they are the actions of lawless domestic terrorists, untrained, masked agents taking human beings off the streets with no warrants, a violation of the Fourth Amendment, no due process, no trial, a violation of the Fifth and Sixth Amendments. The way these human beings have been treated, the methods of ICE taking people off the streets, holding them for days or longer at detention centers, sending them to concentration camps in Florida or Texas, or out of the U.S. to CCOT, the prison in El Salvador, all again with no due process. How would this not be considered cruel and unusual punishment, a violation of the Eighth Amendment? Watching ICE brutalize and disappear people these last several months has been terrible to acknowledge that those are the actions happening in our country. A nation that used to pride itself on law and order and due process has fallen into an authoritarian shithole. For those of you on various social medias, you've probably already come across several videos out there of crimes being committed by ICE. In the interest of time, I don't have any of those clips pulled. Instead, if you are someone not familiar with just how unhinged and violent the acts of ICE have become, I highly recommend either of these recent videos from other channels I trust for news. These are two channels I watch regularly to stay informed among a few others. Both the Humanist Report, done by Mike Figueredo, and the Majority Report with Sam Cedar and his team do excellent work. Give their videos some views if you don't do that already. There are many other sources out there of political commentators and journalists that I rely on to stay informed, and will find ways to shout them out in future videos as a thank you for the work they do. In both of the videos on screen here, they provide several examples of ICE assaulting people without cause and violating their constitutional rights. While each video of ICE's actions provide their own evidence to human rights violations, I want to discuss one case that happened which highlights the violations of the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 8th constitutional amendments. Before diving in, let's do a quick review of those amendments involved. I won't read the full text of each, so go ahead and pause if you wish to read it in its entirety, but I will read the relevant bits. Now, the 4th Amendment is all important, and where a lot of this will be based on. And so it reads, "The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized." So what that means is without a warrant signed by a judge, law enforcement at any level of government do not have the right to illegally seize human beings and arrest them. And that is exactly what ICE is doing. Additionally, moving on to Amendment 5, no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Going on to Amendment 6, in all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed. And Amendment 8, let's just read the full thing. Excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed. And here's the important part, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. With all that stated, we will now discuss the arrest and timeline of Kilmar Obrego Garcia. As you listen to the events, keep in mind those amendments we just reviewed, and ask yourself if his constitutional rights were violated. And again, it does need saying for the dumbasses out there, these rights apply to every person in the United States, citizens and residents, regardless of paperwork status. On March 12th, Maryland resident Kilmar Obrego Garcia was taken into custody by ICE. 3 days later, despite protection from removal to El Salvador as ruled by a prior court judgment, Garcia was deported to the El Salvador prison CCOT, which stands for the Center for Terrorism Confinement. This facility has had various reports of torturing inmates and various other human rights abuses. On March 31st, in court filings by the lawyers representing the Department of Homeland Security, headed by Secretary Kristi Noem, whose official portrait is on screen for reference, her lawyers stated, on March 15th, although ICE was aware of his protection from removal to El Salvador, Obrego Garcia was removed to El Salvador because of an administrative error. Well, okay then, so if it was an administrative error, then just bring him back, right? Easy and simple. Should have been, but no. Rather than comply with a court order and basic human decency, Trump and his Department of Homeland Security ignored the court orders, going as far as, on April 14th, holding a press event with El Salvadorian President Nayib Bukele. During the duration of this press exchange, it was Trump and Bukele both stating how powerless they both were to change Garcia's situation. Considering how both Trump and Bukele were acting, some were wondering if Garcia was no longer even alive. Thankfully, Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen, who was able to get a meeting with Garcia on April 17th, was able to provide evidence he was still alive, although it was a shame that no deal or arrangement was yet made to get him home. Eventually, on June 6th, Garcia was returned to the United States, But this only happened because a federal indictment was filed in Nashville Federal Court on May 21st. Thus again, despite all this originating out of an administrative error, Garcia was transferred from prison in El Salvador to prison in Tennessee. He remained in Tennessee until released on August 22nd in an agreement to travel back home to Maryland. As part of this agreement, Garcia had to check in at an ICE facility in Maryland 3 days later. During this required check-in, Garcia was taken into custody once again. As of September 2025, Garcia is currently in a Virginia detention center awaiting the outcomes of an asylum request and the trial for the alleged human smuggling charges. Now, this story highlights the incompetence and cruelty of this administration's deportation policies. It is not about law and order. It is not about protecting human rights. We have white nationalists and Christian nationalists in this country directing immigration policy, and backed up recently on September 8th by the U.S. Supreme Court allowing ICE agents to continue to racially discriminate in their immigration arresting efforts. Congress must impeach Donald Trump, and in their next immigration reform bill, must abolish ICE. All ICE domestic terrorists involved with carrying out these attacks on our people must be indicted. Sadly, the list of crimes goes on. The next segment will briefly list the ways in which Trump has been profiting off the presidency in direct violations of the Emoluments Clause. Once again, to provide further context, let's review the part of the Constitution I am referencing when I state emolument. In Article 2, Section 1, Clause 7, it reads, "The President shall, at stated times, receive for his services a compensation which shall neither be increased nor diminished during the period for which he shall have been elected, and he shall not receive within that period any other emolument from the United States or any of them. No other emolument shall be taken by the President. No payments, no property, no stocks, no vehicles, nothing of value can be taken by the President except for the predetermined salary, as spelled out here in our Constitution." We already mentioned the settlements Trump has received from suing media companies. Trump has been selling watches and shoes and an assortment of other bullshit, all with his name on it. All of this is unconstitutional. Trump's crime spree did not take long to begin with once taking office. In fact, Trump set the tone for his second term 3 days prior to taking office. On January 17, 2025, he launched his crypto scam that has resulted in him becoming billions of dollars richer this year. Sadly, not everyone has reached the conclusion that cryptocurrencies are nothing more than Ponzi schemes manipulating the value of fake digital currencies, but crypto is something to be its own topic in another video. Trump's crypto scam began 3 days before he took office. So what has Trump done while he's been in office? One of the biggest stories was Trump accepting the large luxury jet from Qatar. This is an outright violation. Trump has been accepting many gifts and bribes from CEOs, like Tim from Apple here. There is also the fact Trump has continued to operate his own businesses with regards to his hotels and golf courses and expanding into other foreign countries. Trump is making deals as the president, but not for the betterment of Americans, to enrich himself and increase the Trump brand. That is all Trump has ever cared about, making himself richer, getting his name out there, and profiting from it. All of this is unconstitutional, and had a fraction of this been done by any other president previously, they would have been impeached already. The final arguments here for Trump's removal from office have to do with his failure to respect the separation of powers in our Constitution and Trump's failure to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. Starting with Congress's power over money, let's review the wording of that clause. As stated in Article 1, Section 9, Clause 7, "No money shall be drawn from the Treasury, but in consequence of appropriations made by law, and a regular statement and account of the receipts and expenditures of all public money shall be published from time to time." On Trump's first day of his second term, 26 executive orders were signed, and several more over the rest of the week. This NPR article gives a good breakdown of the 37 executive orders Trump signed. These first executive orders started the process of chaos and confusion in our government and institutions. During this time and in the first few months of the administration, federal employees were fired, hiring freezes and stop work orders were put in places with devastating effects. By March 10th, 83% of all U.S. aid programs had been eliminated. This decision has resulted in millions of humans around the world not receiving food, medicine, and other essentials, despite the work being put in and contracts signed. There is far more that could be discussed about these executive orders, but let's address the Trump team's defense argument. They claim he is acting under the authority from the Impoundment Control Act of 1974, that this law allows the president to stop payments at their sole discretion. The truth is, this law only created the procedural means by which the Congress considers and reviews executive branch withholdings of budget authority. It requires the president to report promptly to the Congress all withholdings of budget authority and to abide by the outcome of the Congressional impoundment review process. Only Congress by law may decide how money is spent, as we read earlier. Once a president signs a bill into law and money is appropriated, a future president cannot decide to stop payments on executive authority alone. Even under this law that Trump team cites, it still requires congressional approval, from which Trump has not bothered to get. Another area in which the president needs congressional approval is on matters of war. The powers of war are explicitly given to Congress. In Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11 is where Congress is given the authority to declare war, and in Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3 is where you'll find the exception stated, unless actually invaded or in such imminent danger. It is under those conditions that the president could authorize military use without congressional approval. The following examples do not meet that criteria. The first of this was back on June 21st, when the U.S. conducted strikes on 3 Iran nuclear facilities. Iran had not attacked us, Congress did not declare war on Iran, there was no imminent threat. These strikes were just another example of Trump's unhinged militarism making the world less safe. Although destabilizing and committing war crimes in the Middle East isn't the only place Trump wants to do this. On September 2nd, Trump carried out their first illegal strike of a speedboat off the coast of Venezuela. They claimed it was a boat on its way to the U.S. to transport drugs. If that was the case, that is why we have the U.S. Navy or Coast Guard that could have intercepted and inspected those boats. If there was a crime being committed, you gather the evidence and convict through a due process, not kill indiscriminately through extrajudicial means. That's the point, though. Trump and his administration don't care about due process. They don't care about the Constitution or rule of law. 11 people were murdered in the first strike. The second strike, on September 15th, killed another 3 people. 4 days later, on the 19th, another 3 were killed. As I was pulling all this information together, on October 3rd they did a 4th boat strike, killing 4 more civilians. In total so far, 4 ships and 21 people murdered by our fascist, unhinged government. It is depressing, presenting all of this evidence, and this still isn't even a comprehensive list. I know there are more stories and evidence out there that could add to this case, but due to time constraints were left out. I hope for those of you watching, if impeachment was not already a position you supported, then hopefully with this new information, your mind may have been changed. If not, then I have one final clip of Donald Trump speaking. This was recorded back on May 4th of 2025. Trump is speaking with Kristen Welker on Meet the Press.
Your Secretary of State says everyone who's here, citizens and non-citizens, deserve due process. Do you agree, Mr. President?
I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know.
Well, the Fifth Amendment says
I don't know. It might say that, but if you're talking about that, then we'd have to have 1 million or 2 million or 3 million trials. We have thousands of people that are some murderers and some drug dealers and some of the worst people on earth. Some of the worst, most dangerous people on earth. And I was elected to get them the hell out of here, and the courts are holding me from doing it.
But even given those numbers that you're talking about, don't you need to uphold the Constitution of the United States as president?
I don't know. I have to respond.
Asking the president if they are supposed to uphold the Constitution is not a trick question. Trump responding by saying, "I don't know," is unacceptable. In Article 2, Section 1, Clause 8, That is where in the Constitution it specifically states that when the president-elect takes the oath of office, they must say, to the best of their ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. Trump saying explicitly, I don't know, is an outrageous admission of them violating their oath. Once again, if that was said by any previous president, that would have been their last statement as president before being impeached. Yet for some goddamn reason, Trump remains to continue to ruin this country and drag it down a fascist shithole. Everything we discussed should certainly be reason for impeachment. As stated in Article 2, Section 4, Clause 1, the President, Vice President, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. It is well past time for the 119th Congress to act. And I will also just make a quick point here that it's more than just the president. Impeaching Donald Trump doesn't solve all of our problems. J.D. Vance, who would replace Trump, is just as supportive of fascism as Trump is. Here is his position on the illegal extrajudicial killings off the coast of Venezuela.
And I was talking to Secretary Hegseth, and you know what he said? He said, you know what, Mr. Vice President, we don't see any of these drug boats coming into our country. They've completely stopped. And I said, I know why. I would stop too. Hell, I wouldn't go fishing right now in that area of the world. But that is what a military that is dedicated to its purpose and a commander-in-chief that is dedicated to the national good can do.
So according to Vance, the good our military can do is murdering fishermen because we mistake them as drug runners. To impeach Trump, Vance and the entire cabinet would require separate articles of impeachment, but the evidence is there to impeach all of them. And they are all equally deserving of it. Remember, I am one person and yet was able to bring all this information together to make the case for Trump's impeachment. So what is stopping Congress, who has far more access to resources than myself? What the hell are they going to do about Trump's crimes? Where is their spine to do the right thing? To understand the failures of our current congressional leaders, let's start with a quick review of Impeachment Basics. While we still have a Constitution and an independent-ish Congress, the power of impeachment is divided between both houses of Congress. The House is responsible for deliberating if articles of impeachment should be put forth. As stated in Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5, the House of Representatives shall choose their Speaker and other officers, and shall have the sole power of impeachment. If passed by a simple majority, it then moves on to the Senate. It is the job of the Senate to hold a trial and give final say if the articles of impeachment have merit. If so, then the office holder is removed from office. The Senate's role in impeachment is defined in Article 1, Section 3, Clauses 6 and 7. The Senate shall have the sole power to try all impeachments. When sitting for that purpose, they shall be on oath or affirmation. When the President of the United States is tried, the Chief Justice shall preside, and no person shall be convicted without the concurrence of 2/3 of the members present. Judgment in cases of impeachment shall not extend further than to removal from office and disqualification to hold and enjoy any office of honor, trust, or profit under the United States. But the party convicted shall nevertheless be liable and subject to indictment, trial, judgment, and punishment according to law. An increasing number of Americans already support the idea of impeachment. But if this is to happen now, then more Republican representatives need to have standards, grow a spine, and support the next round of impeachment proceedings. If more Republican voters join us in protests and continue speaking up the way they have in town halls, then it's possible the current Congress could act now and do the right thing. Our Congress is nearly split 50-50 in both houses, with Republicans holding a majority in both. Most votes going back the last several decades have been on party lines. This partisan gridlock is nothing new. What is new is Republicans in Congress are increasingly showing loyalty to Trump, not to our Constitution or the rule of law. The Democratic Party, the opposition party, has also largely failed to do what is needed to mitigate the damage from this fascist administration. After Trump's illegal strikes on Iran back in June, Representative Al Green from Texas's 9th Congressional District did push forward articles of impeachment against Trump for usurping Congress's power to declare war, introduced on June 24th. Unfortunately, only 78 other Democratic members in Congress would join Al Green in supporting this impeachment. The sad truth is, our Congress is useless. Either they be in Trump's cult, or they're bought by various political action committees and other corporate donors. One such example is this graphic from AIPAC Tracker. The vast majority of our Congress take money from the Israeli lobby. This is one of the main reasons why our money and weapons kept going to Israel despite them carrying out a genocide against the Palestinian people. The question then becomes, just how many members of Congress actually work for the American people? Sadly, the answer is bleak. In my opinion, we have at best around 16 Congress members that care about our Constitution, freedom, and democracy. There might be a few more, but at this moment I can only say with certainty these 16 on screen have a record of doing the right thing about 80% of the time. They aren't all perfect, and each member could be its own longer conversation. I put this forward just to show how little support and representation the average American person has in Congress. Of 535 seats, these 16, I can say with certainty, are worth re-electing. Maybe at most 25 if I had some time to do more research. So without a functioning independent Congress, what can we do? We must organize and elect a brand new Congress. All 435 seats in the House are up for election, and so are 33 seats in the Senate in 2026. Every Congress member who supported Trump's cabinet picks and agenda, every member who has sold out to large money interests and corrupted through PACs, every member who has been bribed by AIPAC to support Israel's genocide, every Congress member who has failed their oath to the Constitution to protect it and the general welfare of the United States, including the welfare of every person, regardless of any characteristic fascists will want to divide us by. We are all human beings. Every Congress member that has failed to maintain their basic moral decency must be replaced. Who they are replaced by is important. Voting blue no matter who, because Trump and Republicans are bad, is not a message nor a strategy. It has lost us the election in 2024 because establishment Democrats refuse to embrace policies that would help Americans at the expense of their donors. Because these politicians have been bribed to protect the profits of their donors, they stand for nothing, and their silence has allowed Republicans for years to lie about the left's policy goals and gotten away with it since there has been no real countermessage. Until now. The next wave of Democrats cannot allow that to continue. Unbought leaders do exist, but we have to support them in their primaries so that they can defeat their fascist opponents in the general election. The candidates on screen right now, I will read off their names and what seat they're running for, going from left to right for each of the 3 rows here. Now, if I mispronounce anyone's name, I very much apologize, but I will try my best here. So, starting with the top row, we have Karen Breslin for Colorado Senate, Richard Ojeda running for North Carolina's 9th Congressional District, Saikat Chakrabarti for California's 11th District, Kat Abagazale running for Congress's Illinois' 9th District. For Michigan Senate, Abdul El Sayed. Angela Gonzalez-Torres for California's 34th District. Next we have the middle row here, Rebecca Cook for Wisconsin's 3rd District. Graham Plattner running for Maine Senate. And Elijah Manley for Congress in Florida's 20th District. Bottom row, for New Hampshire Senate is Karishma Manjur. Jackson Franklin for Congress in Indiana's 5th District. Donovan McKinney from Michigan's 13th District. Zishan Hafiz for Texas's 33rd District. Ori Bush running for Missouri's 1st District. And Salam Bhatti for Virginia's 1st District. The main qualifier for everyone being on this list is their support of Medicare for All, with the exception of 2 people on this list. The first is Rebecca Cook from Wisconsin 3rd, and Richard Ojeda running in North Carolina's 9th. With Rebecca, when you go to her campaign page, she doesn't say Medicare for All by name, but does support policies that would be steps to get us to Medicare for All. And with her being endorsed by Bernie Sanders, I will defer to Bernie on this, and that is why she is on the list. That and her page lists other policies that are also important and worthy of support. Similarly, Richard Ojeda in North Carolina's 9th District also doesn't say Medicare for All on his campaign page, but during his previous runs for Congress, if I remember correctly, he did support it, so I'm not sure why it's not on his campaign page now. I would hope he would support Medicare for All if a bill made it to the floor for a vote. But as with Rebecca and everyone else on this list, they also have their own strong messages for how to make this country better. When we discussed the problems with many of our current elected officials, they have been corrupted by PAC money and other large money interests. The worst corruption being AIPAC's ability to blind our Congress to an ongoing genocide against Palestinians with our weapons for 2 years. These 15 candidates do not take PAC money, several of them being endorsed by organizations like AIPAC Tracker and Justice Democrats. Links to those sites will also be included with every candidate's campaign page. If you see a candidate listed where you live, learn more about them and consider helping their campaign. As I learn more about other campaigns that are equally worthy of supporting, such as these candidates, I will do update videos on the 2026 primary elections as we get closer to them. If you know of a 2026 campaign worthy of support but not on my list, leave me a comment below to let me know. To close out this video, there are a couple non-violent ways we can hope for this fascist nightmare to end. If our Congress continues to fail to act to impeach this fascist threat, then, as long as 2026 elections remain free and fair, then maybe with a brand new Congress they can pursue articles of impeachment against Trump, his cabinet, and Vance. Alternatively, in the time leading up to those elections, we the people do have some power to maybe move the needle now. This would be done by protests that interrupt capitalism, with the best being a general strike. If the profits of capitalists are truly threatened, then maybe they call up the Republican puppets and allow them to move forward with impeachment. A general strike would be most effective, but at the same time, millions of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. Not working for an unknown number of weeks is a horrifying thought for people, especially as we see how eviction-happy landlords tend to be. But even if we only continue to do protests, while they might not give us the immediate change desired, they can still move the needle and still have importance. This upcoming Saturday on October 18th, there will be massive protests again, across the country for the second No Kings protests. Trump has made it clear over the years, and how bothered he is when people who don't like him go to protests. So at the very least, on that day, go find your nearest protest. Join the crowd, meet some new people, all while we remind that fascist dipshit in the White House he is despised by the majority of this country. He does not have a mandate to terrorize our communities. Let him know in the streets his days as president are numbered. He has committed plenty of crimes worthy of impeachment. The evidence is there. All that is lacking is the spine of a Congress willing to do what is right. With all that said, we will end it for this chat. Thank you all for joining me today. If you liked what you heard, please hit that like button and share the video. If you want to know what policies should be pursued after impeaching Donald Trump, click the video link on your screen right now. Thank you all for listening, and take care.